Welcome to Discuss With Us podcast, where we are unpacking the world through a Christian lens. I am your host, Darcy Durkowski, along with my husband, Brian, and our intention is to pose topics, trending and otherwise, and unpack them with the help of some research, insights from our different backgrounds, and even some listener input in a way that is thought-provoking and entertaining. So get comfortable, grab your favorite beverage, and discuss with us.
Welcome back to another episode of Discuss With Us. My name is Brian, along with my wife Darcy, across the way on the ones and twos.
Hello, happy Sunday.
Yeah, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. A little tired from all of our work over the weekend, cleaning up trees from the storm.
Yes, everyone is going to be in for a treat today. We have a couple of guests coming, mainly because we had 4 trees blow over in the last storm that came through, and I am exhausted from trying to cut them up.
Yes.
So I'm going to phone it in.
I hope not. But so
just a little.
The idea for this episode came from something that happened to me last summer. I think it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
And it was a time that I felt God speaking to me through another person, but pretty clearly knew it was him right off the bat.
Yeah, but before we get into it, because we're going to jump pretty quick, because we do have a couple guests and trying to not make this like a 2-hour podcast this week, but if you have some drive time, maybe this one will be a little longer. It was an interesting thought that you had of how God speaks to us, and I think it's a big question for a lot of us today. I know I have struggled with this maybe a little bit, because if you are Christian and you are reading the Bible, one of the things that always has struck me is, I think predominantly, obviously, Old Testament, it's like God speaks directly to people. I want to say it's over 2,000 times. And so you read all these things and you see all these great stories. I mean, God, if people try to ignore him, he's literally like banging down the door and sending angels and forcing people to hear him. And then in present day 2024, so many of us struggle, like, was I hearing God or what was this?
My thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm praying for an answer. I have literally sat and said, God, just make it as obvious as you can to me, whatever choice you would have me make. And I myself have struggled with that, and especially, like I said, when you read the Bible. So today should be pretty interesting. We're going to give perspectives both of us have had, as well as 2 guests, and it should be, you should get a whole well-rounded thought of multiple people, not just us today.
Yeah. There's nothing that we can't say, step 1, let's do this, and then you'll hear from
this
God.
This isn't WikiHow.
But we do hope to share our stories, and then just kind of also discuss, how can we hear God more often?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Do you want to go first with yours?
Sure. Okay, so I didn't even prep this. So
this was your idea.
I know. Okay, so last summer I had been working at the same place for about 6 years and loved my job, wanted to work there long term, but I was having a really stressful go of it.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. There was some new roles, some new people in roles. There was some new processes.
We live in Texas. Your headquarters was in Phoenix.
Yeah. Just some obstacles and some things I was dealing with that was making it way more stressful than it had been. And I just wasn't really sure what all the outcomes were going to be, but I was definitely stressed about it. And just trying to be heard, trying to know when I should, push hard for something, when I should wait my turn, just all these things I was dealing with work. And so all that's going on in the background. And just one day I am driving to the service station in your truck. I had gas cans in the back. We were going to be Working on
If
our
nobody
property.
remembers, it was super hot all summer long last
Yes.
summer, like over 100 every day.
Yes. And so I was just making a quick trip to the gas station, and I'm driving down our back roads to the gas station, and I see this lady who I didn't know, who she was, but we see her often
Yeah.
walking these roads. She pushes like a little cart and everything, and sometimes has her umbrella out. She walks these roads
Like,
all the time. Like
yeah.
it's always just baffling. Like if you go into town and eat and have dinner to see how far that she's made it when you come
Yes.
back.
Yeah.
So, I recognize this lady, but I don't know who she is. But anyways, I'm on this back road and I pass her by, and in my head I'm like, okay, I just can tell by her look that she doesn't want to ride anywhere. Like this is her mode of transportation, and she probably doesn't
Hmm.
want, she doesn't want anybody's help in that way. But I was like, man, it's just so hot today. Um, and so I just thought about it a little bit and thought, okay, at the gas station, I'm going to buy just a big water
Hmm.
and give it to her. And like I said, I really hadn't had any kind of nudging like this before. I've passed her before and thought like, man, she walks some distances, but never had this kind of nudging.
Urge to stop or
Yeah, this
anything.
urge
Yeah.
to stop. So, anyways, I was in the gas station, bought her a big cold water, and on my way out, grabbed her a pair of sunglasses and get back in the truck. And I'm like, okay, now just hopefully she hasn't turned off on a road that
Yeah.
I
Now
won't
you
see
got to
her.
find her.
So, sure enough, I pull up next to her and roll down my window, and she's just not even listening to me at first. I say, "Hey, I got you a water," and she's not even looking at me, and she says, "I have waters." Okay. I said, but this one's cold. And she's like, no, mine are cold too. I'm fine. And I was like, okay. I said, well, I bought a pair of sunglasses. Do you want them? It's pretty hot out today. And she was like, no. And again, she's just still not even looking at me.
Yeah.
And so I think I said something like, well, I'm just going to toss these over then because I'm not wearing them. I have sunglasses. These are for you. I got them for you. I'm going to like toss them out if you're not going to come get them. And that, I don't know why, but that changed everything. And she turned and looked at me and came over, and she took the sunglasses, and I said, do you want this water? I don't even remember. I don't even think she
No,
took
she
it.
didn't
She
take
didn't
the
take it.
water.
She was like, I have some. It's fine. And so she took the sunglasses and she said, is there a way that how can I pray for you?
Mm.
And so I thought about it, and it caught me off guard. So I was like, I don't know, because we were trucking along.
Yeah.
I didn't have any like pressing need I could think of, but she pressed me
Hmm.
now, and now she was being stubborn. And she was like, "No, how can I pray for you? Not your family or anything like that. How can I pray for you? What's something God's telling me to ask you for what you want? What can I pray for you?" Oh, because that's how I answered. I said, I don't need anything. And she goes, no, no, God's not asking for what you need. He's telling me to ask you for what you want.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. And so work was on my mind. And so I just said, you know, I'm pretty stressed out at work right now. And
Mm.
hasn't always been that way, but I'm pretty stressed out. And I could definitely use, some prayers and guidance.
Hmm.
And so she said, okay. And she just thought about it for a second. And I think she even asked me a couple of other questions, and, like, where do you live up here? And just conversational.
Hmm.
And then she came back to it and she said, God's telling me to tell you that your work stuff is going to be completely fine here pretty shortly.
Mm.
And it's not going to look how you think. And it's going to surprise you, but it's going to be okay. And I was like, okay. And in that moment, like, I appreciated her,
Yeah.
and appreciated her saying that, and we talked a little bit more, and I think that's pretty much the conversation that we had. But I did call you immediately, and
Yeah.
I told
You
you.
couldn't even wait the 2 minutes to get home from
No,
there.
I know. I was like 30 seconds from pulling in our drive, but I called you and I told you, and because it did right then, I didn't, when we hear from people and they're saying, God told me to tell you, it's a nice thought and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that we also have to be careful about listening to everybody,
Right.
right? Even if they're saying that it's from God, we have to kind of decipher. But just in what she said, I did tell you, I was like, that did give me some peace.
Yeah, and it was
Thinking
funny
about it.
because it felt real, right? And
Mm-hmm.
let's paint the picture. It's a lady who literally walks down the roads. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we see her pretty regularly, and pushes a shopping cart. Like it's not some, it's not like you were talking to the preacher at church
Right.
or anything like that, or a counselor or anything. Yet, what she said just resonated,
It
and
did.
it just felt real,
And I
even how you'd
do.
explained it to me.
Yes, and like I said, I left out some of the small talk conversation
Yeah.
we had, but some of that I think was helpful in making the whole conversation resonate too,
Yeah.
because she did hit the nail on the head a couple of times, and this wasn't anything that she proclaimed that God told her to
Yeah.
tell me or anything. She just said we were talking about, and I shared this, I think a little bit of it last
I
episode,
think so.
where I was talking about working on our property and everything, and she was like, don't get stressed out about that. Your place right now is bonding with those kids.
Yeah.
You'll have your day, out there
Yeah, that
working.
affected you. I remember
It
that.
did. It did. So just the fact that, the rest of the conversation kind of held water too, I think. And so anyways, I left there, and like I said, I did feel kind of a little bit of a weight lifted. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I think that was probably God telling me something, just to chill out about it,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be okay, and felt some peace about it. And then the following week,
Yeah. Father's Day. Or no, wasn't it?
I don't
Yeah, it
know.
was. It was Father's
Yeah.
Day weekend because we were camping.
Yes. Yes. Um, the very next week, um, I my boss was in town and I got called into the office, and long story short, I got fired.
First time ever, right?
Out of the blue. Um, I say out of the blue, I was butting heads with some people that were high up, but
Still, it
still
wasn't
it
like
was.
that was expected.
Yeah, it was out of the blue.
Yeah, because I remember you called me right after, and I was
Hmm.
like, wait, what?
And so it was definitely shocking. And we've talked before. We are a two income household and need
Yeah.
to be. So there
Mm-hmm.
was definitely that stress there. But I immediately thought of Reverend B is what she calls herself, because
Yeah.
I asked her before I drove away. I said, what's your name? What can I call you? And she said, Reverend B. And I immediately thought of her and thought, yep, that was definitely God prepping me for not going into a complete spiral this week after I got fired.
Yeah, and with your personality type, you even more so than most would not handle
No.
getting fired that well,
Mm-mm.
because you would take it as a failure, and that's not really what happened.
No.
They were getting rid of the position, but that,
Mm.
I mean, didn't
Well, it
make anything
didn't either. Yeah.
feel better. But the other, I think, crazy side of it was, I absolutely, when you talk about like the finances and stuff like
Yeah.
that, I took it in stride. Now, part of that is we're married, and
Mm.
I didn't want, if you needed to be weak in that moment, I didn't
Hmm.
need to. But we were both just kind of like,
We were like, we'll figure it out.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that our peace came directly from just knowing, through all of our background and everything, but also through what I feel like God was telling me in that conversation with Reverend B is it's gonna work out.
yeah,
It's gonna
it's
be
gonna be what
perfectly
it's gonna
fine,
be.
and that he knew about it is kind of, I don't know what helped what helped me is just to think that God, it's like God prepped me,
Yeah,
and for what was coming, and we did walk through that whole thing with peace, and definitely came out on the other side perfectly fine. And you and I both have talked, and talked then as we were trying to decipher,
mm-hmm.
what to do next and what job to take and all these things, how this was going to be better for us. But I also know I never would have left probably my old company.
No, I don't
And
think so.
so I think, this God was so in this. And but I just I needed to hear that. I think God knew I would need to hear that and need to not in a any other way but than to be told
Right.
face to face by someone. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah, and that's a super cool story. So now, all right, if you're keeping track at home, that's story one, and we've got one of using another person as a vessel. So I think that's, and we'll talk about this when we summarize. You
Hmm.
can't just take everyone that talks to you and
Right.
says that you've got to be um, discerning of
Hmm.
information that came, but and this was, like I said, out of all the people, this wasn't a counselor we were going to, this
Right.
wasn't the pastor of our church, anything like that. This was complete random stranger and not someone you would have naturally assumed to be someone giving you advice. But right or wrong, to this day, I fully believe that was a true moment.
Mm.
That came from God. Whether Reverend B has ever had any more of those, I couldn't
Right.
tell you. I have no idea, but I just think in that moment it was, and it did prepare us for a peaceful transition of what otherwise would have been super turbulent waters.
Yes.
So I mentioned when we started that you read in the Bible and it's like over 2,000 times God directly speaks to people. And that was one of the things through adolescence and early adulthood that kind of bothered me. I would constantly, and it's over trivial stuff. Hey, should I do this or do that? And I always have major struggles. I am the king of, buyer's remorse,
Yeah.
and I'm the guy who
You go
just,
back and forth
yeah,
and
I
you
can't.
research everything to
Yes, I
no
struggle to
end.
make a decision on
Yeah.
anything. It can be which hamburger should I get at this new restaurant? It's just it's bad. It's bad. And so I've always been like, God, just speak to me, help me make some of these decisions easier, and never really got straight answers. Just not that voice, like I said,
Right.
that you'll find in the Old Testament. Well, mine's not that crazy or life changing, but it was impactful
Hmm.
and did really help my faith journey. And so it's documented pretty much my entire life. I've worked in Houston either for my dad or now my other job, but either way, I've always been a commuter. And I was driving home on 290, and my dad's family is all from Chapel Hill. So, anyways, when I would always be crossing the river, sometimes randomly I would just think about family or anything like that. I don't know.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, one day I'm driving home, and it was literally as I crossed the Brazos River, I just felt this kind of urge to go to my grandparents. And that was completely out of the blue for me. And I kept
Out of the
driving.
norm and
Yeah,
everything.
I kept
Yeah.
driving, and I was like, this is. It just felt weird. It was like an urging, almost like a magnet was pulling me to turn and go to their house. So, anyways, I drive the next 10 minutes, and I get to Brenham, and I called my mom, and I was like, because my dad wasn't home yet. That was the thing. And I called my mom, and I was like, I just had this really weird feeling that I needed to go to our grandparents' house. And ironically, and this is also kind of a little different for her, she was like, let's go. And she didn't try to stop me. And keep in mind, this is my dad's parents, not my mom's. So my mom was like, let's go, let's get in the car and go. And so I was like, all right. And we drove out there, and then it was super funny. We pull up, or I guess I say super funny. We pull up, and my grandfather was, he was like struggling. Um, Someone else was there. I can't remember who it was, but he had like a health scare. I think he was having problems breathing. And at the moment, he was fine, but everyone was trying to get him like, hey, you need to go to the hospital. And then me and my mom just randomly show up,
Hmm.
which looking back, the funny thing is, I don't think they took it as off the wall as it should have been that we just showed up because they didn't have cell phones or anything. Like, I don't even think we called them. We just went out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I'm I'm obviously like, okay, I'm here for a reason. And so I kept trying to tell him, like, I was sent to come here. You need to go to the hospital. Whatever's wrong with you, we need to get it handled right now.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. Um, and long story short, he didn't want to go. Was very stubborn. I don't know where that comes from in our family, but he didn't want to go. But it did. The moment was still powerful. Like once I got there and realized something had happened, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, this was
This was,
God. I've actually
yeah,
had one of these moments. I mean, it wasn't like a voice in my head; it was more of an urging. But
yeah.
that did solidify things for me, although he would not listen to me. But it wasn't long after that he ended up having more health problems, and just down the short time after that, he ended up passing away. But it kind of also, I let my dad know, he let his sister know, and it kind of just alerted people that,
The family, yeah.
yeah, that something here is
There's a little
going.
bit of a
Yeah,
decline.
and it was a little bit later. It wasn't like it was back to back,
Yeah.
but it was through that moment that I think we were all aware of what was to come shortly thereafter. But
Right.
that part of the story isn't even the important part. It was just I'd never felt a it was like a literal tug, like
Mm-hmm.
like like I said, like a magnet, like and I didn't listen at first. I kept driving, and so
Mm-hmm.
this did, going back, make me think Old Testament, like when you would try to not listen to God, and it was just like I couldn't stand, I couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah.
It grew and grew and grew. When I wouldn't turn left to go down 1371, it was just like, nope, you're not missing this.
Mm-hmm.
So then again, so here you go. For those of you keeping score at home now, I had more of a magnetic feeling. So we've got speaking to someone through another
Another person.
vessel.
Mm-hmm.
We've got maybe not you're hearing a straight voice, but more of the magnetic pull to just take you where you want to go.
Right.
And now we're going to pivot over, and our first guest we're going to have is Brent of Milk and Honey Ranch. And do you want to give us a little background, Darcy?
Yeah. So I knew of Brent. He goes to my uncle's church in town, but really started following him and his story and his ranch and everything after an accident that his wife was in.
Mm-hmm.
Really terrible accident that if you're around Brenham, you probably are familiar with. It was kind of all over the news.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but through their, experience and his sharing, updates and just kind of the state of their household through the whole thing, lots of people have been moved by their story. So, I'd reached out to Brent to see if there was anything during, all of what was going on with them, um, any time that he felt God speaking to him.
Yeah.
And so he responded. So we'll get into that story. And it's different than what we've talked about so far, and that's what I love about these stories. Is,
Yes.
I think the more differences and that we can look at can cause us to look for those different ways in other areas of our life. And the more that I think we're looking for it, the more we will hear. So
All right. Without further ado, let's give Mr. Brent a call.
yeah.
Hello?
Hi, Brent.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's Darcy and Brian. Um, so we followed your story, and I was so excited when you agreed to share with us for this episode. Honestly, we could devote an entire episode to your story, but for those that don't know, can you introduce yourself and give a little description of what happened a couple of months ago?
Sure. Sure. So, my name is Brent, and I'm the founder of Milk and Honey Ranch, which is it's grown into be a little farm resort that families can come out and just be in awe of God's creation and
Right.
experience His love through animals. On January 8th, my wife was on her way home during a crazy rainstorm. She was coming home from Houston and lost control of the car. We still don't know what happened because she has no memory. She crashed into a barrier. She T-boned it. The barrier did not have any padding.
Wow.
So the car just took the full force of the concrete barrier. It crushed the car. And her injuries were so severe that she had to be life flighted to Memorial Hermann. They weren't sure she would live through the night.
Mm.
And then she did.
Yeah, it gives me chills. Brian, my husband, works in Houston every day, and I remember that he mentioned that there was a backup on 290, and even saw the car and everything.
Yeah, I actually drove by it, and it was very chilling to see.
Yeah, still gives
Yeah.
me goosebumps.
Yeah, it's I had some EMTs contact me, once they saw the story on Facebook and things like that, and once she was stable and they thought it was respectful, they messaged me to say they don't know how she survived.
Mm.
Having looked at the wreckage, and one was on site, while she was being
Yeah.
airlifted. And so it really, I attribute that to the immediate prayers of people. Even as her helicopter was coming up, people in the traffic were praying
Right.
that didn't even know who it was. And then later found me to tell me that they had been praying for whoever was in that. So um, I'm
Very
so
powerful.
grateful for the EMTs, the doctors, everybody. But I really think it was prayer that saved her life.
Right. And you guys have been through so much, because it obviously wasn't just, what happened that day, but all the days to come. And there's, like I said, we could devote a whole episode to your whole story. Been through so much. But what we want to focus on today, and what I had reached out to you about, is, I said, Brent, is there with all that y'all have been through very recently, is there any time that you felt God speaking to you through that whole process, or how did you hear God through that whole process? And I loved your answer. So if you would go into some of that, and whatever else you'd like to share, through that time, kind of how God carried you, we're all ears.
Yes, 2023 had been a extremely stressful year for me. Just trying to get things done on the ranch, and toiling
Mm-hmm.
so hard to make sure. And I did not have peace in 2023. I was worrying about everything, carrying the load of everything. And when I got the news about my wife, it was almost easier to trust the Lord with this
Hmm.
than with the ranch, because I was so out of my depth. There was absolutely nothing that I could do. That all I could do was fall into uh, uh, the mercy of God.
Yes.
And with that complete surrender came the most unbelievable peace that I've ever felt in my life.
Wow.
And I could have had that in 2023 too,
That's a good point.
but I didn't. But
Right.
but I think the lesson here, if anything that I've been a Christian, as long as I can remember. Um, but there was something about this which sounds crazy, because my wife was just in a horrendous car accident.
Mm.
She's still recovering, from traumatic brain injury and different things. But the goodness of God that I experienced in this, when the Bible says that His goodness draws men to repentance,
Mm.
I tell you, I felt like I was living that verse in 4D. Um, just His mercy and His kindness and His gentleness through this whole thing uh, uh, gave me such incredible peace that even when they were saying they're not sure she's going to make it, and then they're saying she's in a vegetative state, and then they're saying she's blind and crippled, and then it didn't matter.
Hmm.
It really didn't matter, because I was just so certain that we would see God's goodness without assigning what that goodness needed to be like. So, for example, it's not God is good because she lived through the night.
Right.
God, his goodness was there regardless of the outcome that happened.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we're like, oh, God is so good because he answered a prayer that we were praying. No,
Right.
God is good no matter what. And even when we don't see the answers that we thought we should see for the prayers, years down the line, we turn around and go like, oh my goodness, God, you are so good. Because it's regardless of what we assign it to. It's his character, it's his nature. And that's what has taught me a new lesson to bring peace in. I don't have to hold on to anything.
Hmm.
That's why we can have peace.
Right.
Because he's the one that holds the world together. He's the one that holds my life together. He was the one holding this situation together. And I was actually telling my wife in the car because I had always said, we had joked and I mean I was serious when I said this, but I was like, if I'm ever maimed in an accident or something like that, just have them like put me down. Like
I'm the
I don't
same
want to
way.
live. Yeah, I don't want to live without a leg, or I don't want to live without this. It's just and I tell you, God dealt with my heart so gently,
Hmm.
but so powerfully through all of this. Because when my wife, once she was able to get out of the bed and that, but she was like a zombie, uh, um, and I was leading her just to take a few steps to go to the bathroom, and there I am, like cleaning my wife and stuff like that.
Right.
Stuff that as a husband I would have said like, I'm the typical husband that's like, and I hope we can talk about this. It's like, oh, it's your period. I don't want to know. Like I don't even want
Yes.
to get. I don't
Yes.
even want to buy tampons at the store, kind of thing. And here I am, and I mean this genuinely. I said to the Lord that if this is what the rest of my life looks like, taking care of my wife in this capacity where I have to take her to the bathroom and clean her and stuff, I said it would be the greatest honor of my life.
Wow.
It's
And
crazy how quickly, well, for him it may seem like it takes some time, but for us when we do feel the transformation in our hearts, how quickly it
yes,
happens.
yes,
Huh.
and absolutely. And it's just, I've never heard God speak audibly. I'm not one of those people like,
Mhm.
I think, possibly some people hear God easier than others. For me, it's just always been thoughts that
Mhm.
are just so brilliant that I know they didn't originate with me.
Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we'll talk to today. I think that through different seasons of life, God probably speaks to us in different ways because, kind of to your point about, you had your head down in 2023.
Yes,
And, not that you weren't a Christian, not that you weren't going through the motions and more, not just going through the motions, maybe, but I think he, in different seasons of our life, has to get our attention in different ways. Maybe we're looking for it over here, and he kind of has to say, "Hey, no, I'm here. I'm right here. This is what I have to say." Um,
yeah,
and so that's one of the things that we're talking about today. I think some people, like you said, may hear him kind of as an audible voice, um, in and then in a different part of their life, it may come to them so differently. But yeah, one of the other ways that I think that I have, I wouldn't say regularly, but heard of from God frequently is when I can recognize that the thought that I'm having is not my tendency.
yes,
It is just
yeah, for
something kind
sure.
of out of the blue or just not really what I actually even want to be thinking. But there it is.
Yeah, it's this whole ranch, what it's become, this resort for others,
Mm-hmm.
was never the plan that I had.
Hmm.
And to your point, when the war broke out in the Ukraine, I had this thought that I need to convert the garage into a hotel for people who need a place to stay
Mm-hmm.
um, from the Ukraine.
Wow.
And I was like, that was never my plan. That was never a thought. I need to do this. And you know that action created this this whole ranch for what it's become today. That first step of obedience, that at the time, if you
Mm-hmm.
had said, "Is this God?" I'll be like, "I don't know. It's just, I, you know, I think this is what I need to do." Um, and now looking back, I mean, it was so clearly God
Yeah.
putting us on a path that only He can get the glory for. Because from our side, it was we kind of like fell into this whole thing.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
meanwhile, God did it.
Yeah. I think another point that you're kind of making with your story is like the first step to, our subject here is how can we hear from God and how can we hear from Him more often? And one of the things that I'm hearing, especially in your story about Daniela, is just the surrender. So
Yes,
surrendering first and then allowing God. I think that's kind of like I was just saying, you had your head down in 2023. If we kind of lift up and say, okay, God, whatever you would have here, we open the door for Him to speak in our life more and more audibly,
yes,
for however that
yes,
comes to us. Maybe not literally audibly, but something that we can recognize.
yes. And for anybody who's listening to this, like, I don't hear from God or whatever. When I talk about my confidence in hearing from God, it's always in hindsight.
Mm,
It's
yeah,
always looking back that I can so clearly see the interactions of God. But looking forward, I can't ever say that I know this is God 100%
right,
outside of Scripture. Scripture is the only time that I can know this is 100% that I'm hearing from God.
right. No, that's a good point. And yeah, I think, part of the reason it is typically hindsight is because, we are supposed to be kind of skeptical about what, I don't know, skeptical is the right word, but, we want to be um, thorough in, I guess, making sure that we are listening to God and not the world. And I think that,
Yes,
I don't know if, like I said, skepticism is the right word, but we should comb through all of that with a fine tooth comb, trying to
yes,
discern what is Him and what isn't. So, like you said, hindsight is definitely more of a testament to what is and isn't. Um,
yes. And he's never going to contradict his word, and God
right.
sounds like his word. And so, if I've got a plan and it's just got a little bit of dishonesty in it,
Mm-hmm.
I can't ever claim that this is from God,
Right.
because there is no lies in God. He is truth.
Yeah.
So just little things like that help us to navigate, our thoughts.
Yes. And I want to go back to your piece as well because that was like we said, it wasn't like God said Daniela's going to be okay and that's what you heard or anything. What you heard and felt was just God's peace through it. And
Yes,
I've said, I think, I don't know which episode it was, a few episodes ago, that our peace that we have in God can be such a testimony to others. And I think
yes,
that you and Daniela and your family is a living testament to that because I know, like I said, I knew of you before. I think you go to my Uncle Arthur's church, but but through the accident with Daniela and just honestly how your whole family handled it and has continued to handle it and give it over to God, that has been such a testament to so many people. The peace that you've had, no matter the outcome, and I think that's really beautiful.
thank you, thank you. Sure. The lesson that I learned out of this is so much of our pain. We torture ourselves in trying to bring things about in
Mm,
our own strength,
yes,
rather than trusting things to the will of God.
yes,
And it's the same thing I said to the kids. I said, there is absolutely no scenario that we will not see the goodness of God. And that is something that I could promise them.
mm,
I couldn't promise them, you know, things outside of that, but I could promise them that we would see the goodness of God. And when you have that promise,
mm-hmm,
you can be at peace.
Yes.
And so it didn't matter what the doctor said. It didn't matter that, because I wasn't even looking at an outcome anymore.
Mm.
It transcended all of those things to say that we are going to see God's goodness, and God is going to work something, and I don't know what it is, but it is going to be good.
Right. That's, when I see people that maybe are not Christian, and are dealing with grief and just the torture that I feel like that is for them, I always
Yeah.
just go back to, my goodness, thank goodness that we have the peace in God that we do in those situations.
Yes.
Or even, Christians that maybe just aren't walking out their faith right now and are kind of like, I'll get into that later, or just, we talk all the time, but on this on this podcast, about how it's just so hard to not get caught up in the world and kind of the rat race, and lose sight. And so maybe there's people like that out there, and like I said, I've said the same message a couple episodes ago, but if you aren't experiencing that peace, you can have it. Just look for it in God.
Yes. You can have it, but it means letting go of what you think you want.
Yes.
Here's the thing: is we think that God's pure will, and this is just a little bit of a fun exaggeration, is
Hmm.
if I really give it all over to God, He's going to make me a missionary in Angola.
Hmm.
If I truly submit to His will, then I'm going to have to be like Mother Teresa.
Yeah, it's going to be
You know,
uncomfortable.
yeah, I'm going to be in the worst place in the world. I'm going to be
Hmm.
all these things, and it's because we don't understand how incredible God is and how incredible His plan is.
Hmm.
And this was something that blew my mind when I was in the hospital. So
Right.
here I am by her bed. She's in her bed. She's talking crazy stuff and making me laugh, and she's got tubes in her, and all of these things. And I haven't changed my clothes in several days. I haven't bathed. I haven't, and I'm sitting there next to her bed, enjoying my wife, like I think the most ever in my life.
Wow.
This is not an exaggeration.
Right.
This is the truth. I had more. I had I had such a satisfying, like my joy, my enjoyment, my laughter, that I said to her that time in the hospital with her was better than our honeymoon. And and,
Right.
it, and it's the truth. It was,
Hmm.
and this is what popped in my mind is that, what are we chasing? We're chasing satisfaction,
Hmm.
right? When we buy a new car, when we build a house, all of these things, we're chasing something. There's a feeling, or something in our hearts that we are after. But God is the one who gives us fullness of joy, and that's
Yes.
why, no matter what His plan is, even if it is being a missionary in Angola,
Right.
I will have more satisfaction, more peace, more like, my life is awesome,
Hmm.
than if I lived in a 50,000 square foot house in the top country to
Right.
live in, or whatever it might be, because it's God's will that gives us that experience.
Right.
I think it's that weightless joy that we look for
Yeah.
that you had kind of described.
Yes.
It's when you get that 50,000 square foot house or that brand new car, it's not weightless. You're figuring out how are you going to pay for it, or you're still comparing it to
Yes.
someone else. That, and you had mentioned this earlier, just the complete weightless. Whatever His
Hmm.
will is, it's going to be okay. That is what we honestly all strive for, but then we
Yeah.
fall short because we chase it in materialistic things,
Yeah.
or try to control it ourselves, and we can't
Hmm.
control it.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't
Absolutely.
matter how uncomfortable our physical, situation is, like you sitting there next to Daniela, as, just not knowing what was going to come of everything, but it was the comfort in your soul, in your, the peace that you felt in God, that's what
Yes.
that's what we can strive for, as Christians, and what's promised to us if we
And
surrender
it
it to
it
God.
it is so, uh sure, I find hard to find the words to describe I say satisfying, but like if you think about like fully satisfied here on earth, I know in heaven it's going to be a whole nother level, but I was like, here's this little hospital room that's ugly, you know, all of this stuff. And like, I wouldn't want to be anywhere in the world right now. Sitting here, laughing with my wife as she's trying to watch Spanish TV and doesn't understand why she doesn't, she, she doesn't know why she can't understand the words they say. I mean, so far it's been one of the best times of my life, what should have been the worst time of my life. Only God can do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, it's so great to have you on the show. Like I said, we could devote an entire episode to you and Daniela. But I appreciate you so much telling your story. And I want to end with a question that we're asking all of our guests that we have on. What has been a game changer for you in your walk of faith?
I would, which is crazy because I said, I've been a Christian almost all my life, and for me to I guess you know things, and then you know things through experience.
Right.
Peter walked with Jesus, and yet there was something in his heart that he didn't know that led him to deny Jesus. And after that, you could not threaten him with his life, and he would not deny Jesus.
Right.
Right.
And I feel that's what's happened to me in this thing of understanding that God's will for our life it's not only trustworthy, but I don't want anything other than God's will.
Yes.
Because it is so good. It is so rewarding. It is so satisfying. And I don't have to like watch him with one eye. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, where you're like,
Yeah.
I need to keep one
Are you
hand on the
sure?
wheel. Jesus, take the wheel, but I'm just going to hold the wheel a little bit here, just
Exactly.
in case you get crazy.
Right.
I
No,
think
that's
that's
great.
what's changed. That's what's changed for me.
Okay. Well, that's good. Okay. Well, again, thank you for coming on.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
like I said, I may be reaching out to you again another time to go in some other aspect of your
Thank
story
you.
because I know it's there. So appreciate you joining us today.
It's my honor to talk to you guys, and thank you for your prayers,
Yes,
and
absolutely. They
you
continue.
being there for my wife. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
All right. So if we're keeping track at home, like I said earlier, so now we've done Darcy, myself, and Brent. And for the first time, we're going to be joined in studio. This is a very huge moment for the podcast. We've got Jared Moehlmann here in studio with his family. So if you get some background noise here, that's not on us, it's
That's
on
just
him.
Cade playing with the toys in the background. But just tell everybody.
There we go. Yeah.
I want everybody to know that we did provide refreshments. So.
Yes. We always say in the beginning, grab your favorite
beverage. Yeah. Okay. So we have Jared here, and I have known Jared for a long time. Went to school with Jared, and then he, despite my greatest efforts at the time, married my cousin.
Very true.
So, our roots go back pretty far, but excited to have you as our first in-studio guest, and welcome to our pool table setup.
Yeah. How do you like it?
Oh, it's great. Love it.
Okay, so you agreed, whether by coercion of Katie or myself, to share a little story about how God spoke to you pretty recently here. So give us a little background on kind of what was going on in your life to set the scene for the story and tell us about it.
Sure. The last 5 years, I've been in professional baseball as a minor league umpire, traveling the country. Probably, I think I added it up, 17 different states I've umpired a professional game
Wow.
That's cool.
Got a lot of checks on that map.
in. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Collected
Knocks it off.
a whole bunch of souvenirs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like to collect shot glasses.
There you go.
Oh,
That's a
cool.
good one.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that the last 5 years, and it's been an experience, to say the least.
For sure.
Yeah, like we talked, you've met some, like, now we'll be watching Major League games, and you're like, oh, yeah, I umpired that guy. I met that guy. Like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely had some cool players in my time in the league. Definitely met some Major League umpires as well, and they're actually great people.
Right.
Oh, not a lot of people would not agree with you there, but
That's all right.
myself
It's the
included,
nature
I don't
of the
know.
game.
We can save that conversation for another episode.
Yeah. So, I've kind of had like a front row seat to watch you guys work through all of this, and I know for you, like every year, I don't know, it doesn't follow the normal trajectory of a career.
No, it doesn't. So middle of March, we typically leave for spring training. Spring training's 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what camp you're in. Then you'll get to come home for 4 or 5 days before opening day. It's usually a week or so after the Major League season starts, so first week of April. And then you're gone. You're on the road for 3-4 months till the All-Star break.
No, it's literally like being a
Yeah.
professional baseball player trying to make it. Like,
Yeah.
you're in the minor leagues.
Yeah. In our schedule, we play 6 days in a row, Tuesday through Sunday, and Monday's our only off day.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, front row seat. I would always be sorting out what level are we at, and what are all the leagues, and where is he at this year, and all the things. So like I said, it doesn't follow the normal trajectory of a career path, and yet it is a very solidified career path to choose. And but there's stresses in our normal work life trying to figure out, if we like where we're at, if we like who we're working with, if we feel like we have a place to move up, and all these things to sort through. But that you had a lot that you were dealing with in figuring out if this was going to be your career path and for how long and all these things. So a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it that a lot of people don't know. It's 5 different levels before you even get a chance at cracking the major leagues. And then even when you get your first opportunity, you're not full-time either. You're still working to be a full-time guy.
Wow.
So you're not full-time until you sign on the dotted line and get those 3 letters behind your name.
So tell us a little about what was maybe more significant in making your decision to keep on going or not keep on going, or just try to sort through it all this year.
This year, well, first let me go back here.
Yeah.
The first few years were actually, I'd say, easier than this last year because it was just Katie and I.
Right.
We got married in 2015. I went to school. You have to go to umpire school to get in, which is a month and a half long course. But I went to school in 18, didn't make it the first time. I ended up in a collegiate league that I spent 2 months on the East Coast umpiring down there. And I came home and I told Katie, I was like, I really want to keep going. I've put in this sweat equity already one time, and I have a better shot at making it the second time.
Yeah.
So I went back in 19. They offered me a position in minor league baseball, and that's where it started. 19, went to Arizona for rookie ball. 20 was the COVID year, so we had to sit out that year.
Yeah, they didn't have minor league.
No, they didn't have much of anything. Then 21 was got promoted to low A. 22 then was promoted to high A. And so those first few years were pretty easy because it was just Katie and I. She's a school teacher, so she had the whole summer months off.
Right.
She was able to come out, fly out. It's pretty easy to fly by yourself. So, and then she could stay as long as we want because we had our own hotel rooms. Yeah, we had to share a rental car with one other guy because it was just you and one guy for the first few years. But had our own hotel room, so that made things easy. Just travel in the rental car.
Yeah, it's kind of an
week.
adventure at that point.
Yeah. So, and then you have all day off during the day because typically your games are at 6, 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So you can go see so many different things. So that was the first few years. And so I was still really gung-ho about it. I was like, I still got this shot to make the major leagues. It's life-changing monetarily.
Right.
Every benefit about it is great, other than obviously being away from home for 6 months.
Right.
Because obviously, the MLB season is February through October.
Yeah.
If you make playoffs. So the minor league season's only about a month shorter.
Yeah.
So September is when I would get home for good. So those first 3 years, 4 years were pretty easy to say, yeah, I want to go back, because travel and everything and seeing Katie was pretty easy. But then in the very last day of 22, we threw another wrinkle in the mix, and Cade decided to make an appearance New Year's Eve, and that brought some other
complicated things.
Yeah, you
sure.
had to make some more decisions, and it threw something else in there you have to think about. So, and Katie and I both had talked about, well, let's get to Double A, because the Texas League is a Double A league, and Corpus, San Antonio, and Frisco are all within 2.5, 3 hours. Like, let's get to Double A. Let's see how that travel works. See how it is being close to home, if it's something we can still manage.
Right.
So this last season, I was fortunate enough to get promoted to Double A, was in the Texas League, and we did the whole season. And they made quite a few trips. I mean, it was tough on her, because Cade's only 8-9 months at the time.
Yeah.
You know, I left when he was 2.5 months old, and could only see him a week here, a week there. So,
yeah, she would pretty much head out Friday afternoon after school, pick him up, and go to wherever you were at a lot of the time.
Yeah, and that definitely, I could imagine, was tough on her, loading up a couple-month-old.
I'm sure it was.
Luckily, for the most part, she said he's a pretty good rider. He would sleep most of the time, or chill in the back seat. I think there was one time she had to stop somewhere in some small podunk town between here and Corpus, and some sketchy gas station. I had to change him. I had to, do this, do that, and like, oh boy.
Yeah.
But so she was able to do the travel, and it was good. It was nice to see him. But the changing moment, I think, was the All-Star break in July. I'd come home, and I was, by that point, you're already 16 weeks into the season. So after the All-Star break, you have 8 weeks left. And I went back out on the road, and I was just sitting in the hotel room, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if I want to be away. I don't know if I want to continue this travel and not be able to see them full time. Like, most people go to work 8 to 5, and you come home.
Yeah, see them every day.
Yeah, you see them every day, and then you have all the weekends. Well, I didn't have any of that unless they were with me.
Yeah, while y'all were going through this, that was something I used to tell Darcy all the time, is I would feel guilt if I just worked late and got home. Like, there would be nothing worse than you leave, barely see them before you head out the door, and then if I would get home and the boys were already asleep, I always felt like just this guilt of like, I just missed the whole day. And we had conversations, like, obviously Katie's struggling being at home, having this in two places, but I was like, the one I feel for is Jared, because like you're away, so you carry like a different burden with that as the dad too.
Yeah, and you're wanting to be that father figure and be there helping him grow up, and not feeling like he's living without a father kind of thing. And I could see it from the woman's side too. She's got to play mom and dad pretty much.
Exactly.
So she's doing everything. So I really commend her on that and appreciate everything she did.
Yeah, y'all both walked through that season very well.
Yeah. We couldn't have done it. We said that.
No, yeah.
So that was my changing moment of change of heart, change of mind, just thinking about, well, do I want to keep doing this? Because I still have a chance. I'm still in.
Yeah, you're right. You're on the cusp there.
Yeah. I got maybe another year or two in Double A, and then we're hitting Triple A, and it's like you can almost touch it, taste it. Like, I have this shot.
Yeah.
But those last 8 weeks of the season, and just FaceTiming back home, and then having your own alone time because you're in the hotel. Unless you're eating lunch, working out, or doing something else, you're sitting in the hotel room watching TV, scrolling through your phone, whatever, trying to pass the time until you go to the yard. So just pondering those life decisions on what's the benefit of me staying in and maybe having that chance of making it to the major leagues, or what are the benefits of me coming home full time?
Yeah.
So
I think it's also important to note here, because I know both of y'all pretty well, that y'all are both similar to kind of how we are as a couple. You're very analytical.
Very.
And I bet there was like 100 pros and cons list, at least in your head, going through how do you make this decision.
Yeah. So just the analytical part, have a degree in mathematics, so very analytical. And that list just kept getting longer and longer as the days and weeks went on. And so we finally get done with the season and come back home, and it was just every day of the week, every night, it's just, okay, well, what if this happens? What do we do? What if that happens? What do we do? Is there still a road that I can still stay in and see what happens? But continuously praying and just having those talks with Katie and God came to some conclusion, and I'll go into that here.
Yeah.
And it was one day, I want to say in January, putting Cade down to go to bed and feeding him his bottle and whatnot. And I guess you would say, having a conversation with God,
Right.
praying in the mix. I mean, it was kind of one of the two. And I just you talked about it in a prior episode about the different ways God speaks to you or could speak to you. And I think we all, just as humans, want that slap in the face sign.
Exactly.
We don't want to have to read into anything. We just want to here you go. This is it.
Yeah. Wait till you listen to the beginning of this one.
Yeah. And so I'm just sitting in the rocking chair, feeding Cade, just talking, having a conversation with God, praying. And I asked him, I was like, just give me that sign. Just give me that sign that I'm supposed to stay here or I'm supposed to go on the road. And no sooner, it was 30 seconds, I don't know. And Cade just reaches up and grabs my pinky.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, okay.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Was that it?
Does he normally do anything like that?
No. Normally he holds his bottle with two hands and going to town. And, when he's done, you just put him in bed. But so it was kind of like that father-son moment for a minute.
Yeah.
And then it was also well, I just asked for this. Was that it?
Yeah, right. Now was this it? Or
Yeah. Being that analytical, skeptical person I can be sometimes, I'm like, oh my goodness,
right.
Was that it? So he got done and went back in the living room, and I can't remember if I talked to Katie about it right after that or if it was a couple of days, but we got on the conversation about signs, and because we're still going through these decision-making processes, and I tell her the story of what happens, and she just looks at me and goes, what more do you need? What are you looking for? If that's not a sign, I don't know what is. And I was like, you know what? You're probably right.
Yeah.
You're probably right. So at that moment, after that happened, after talking with Katie, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I made the decision. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm staying home.
And so we're just a few months removed from that. Looking back on it, has it become kind of more of a clearer sign?
Most definitely. I think part of it is I had kind of 4, 5, 6 months to prepare for this decision.
Right.
From September until I made the decision, March 4th was when I officially hung it up. But had that, and then having that sign and those conversations, I don't regret it for a second.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I was curious about was kind of the theme of what we've talked about today is it's hard to discern God's voice and following the lead, but when you do, you typically will find this almost instant inner peace with it. Were you going back and forth, or did you just kind of feel like a sense of relief and peace once you made the decision?
Oh, I felt 100 pounds lighter. This just weight was lifted off my shoulder. I thought going into it, I was going to be emotional about making the phone call because we have to call our boss and make that phone call to him and tell him our decision or whatnot. But I didn't get emotional at all. It was like, hey, Dusty was his name. Yeah, it was like, here's what's going to happen. Here's what I'm doing. And after I hung up the phone, I was like, wow, this feels great.
Yeah.
I only felt peace after it.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, that's like Brian said, that's some of what we've talked about today is, and it's, we're talking about how we hear from God, but the truth is if we're hearing from God and acting on it, hopefully, then we are in his will, right? And when we're in his will, that's what we've talked about through a couple of our stories today, the peace that you feel, which is kind of just a reassurance in that you're in His will.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing that I've learned through this process and the things that have come out of baseball for me is you have to be open-minded and open-hearted and have your eyes open for when that sign's coming.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't, necessarily like want to see a sign in some way sometimes.
Yeah.
And so if you're not ready for a sign, even when you're asking for it and he puts it in front of your face, you're not going to actually know it's a sign.
Yeah. Yeah. And similarly, I think we can get so headstrong about like what our vision is, that you're not going to stop for a second to think about something that maybe is different than what you have. So yeah, to your point, then that's another thing that we're talking about today, because part of this podcast is how are we hearing from God, and also how can we keep hearing from God. And I think one of the keys is staying in His Word. Brent said something cool earlier when we were talking with him about his story about, the time that he is 100% positive that he's hearing from God is when he's in the Bible. That's Scripture. So the more that we're reading the Scripture, the more that we're in prayer, the more that we're in church, the more that we're in communion with other Christians, that helps us to recognize, I think, God's voice, and maybe not like audibly, like from the clouds or anything, but just recognize when He's moving and talking to us and what He's saying, versus what might be our own, conscience or just the outside world.
Right, right. And also you got to understand that sometimes those answers and signs are not going to be the ones we want
Yeah.
either. You
Yeah.
got to be willing to accept that, yeah, you're wanting this, you're asking for a sign to go this direction, but He may be sending you in a complete different direction.
Yeah.
And you have to be open to that too as well.
Yeah, and it may not, it doesn't instantaneously, while we can instantaneously feel peace when we know we're in God's will, that doesn't mean that it automatically, we see the betterment of God's choice over what we thought we should do.
Right. Right.
It may take a long time, or you may never even know. I don't know. I mean, those are the mysteries, right? But typically, and that's another thing we've talked about, like hindsight, you can see better, like what was God's voice and everything. But sometimes it takes time to be able to look back. But the common theme here is the peace that you feel when you're in God's will.
Oh, absolutely. It was one of the best peace feelings I've had.
Not related to anything other than just God.
Yeah, yeah. Because I had put it all to Him, asked Him for months and months on the right direction and the sign, and it took 6 months to get that sign. That's another, like, you have to be patient. Like, if you're not feeling it, like you're not seeing any signs or what, just be patient. Keep asking. Put it up to Him, and He will guide you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Patient and open. I think that's the key.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so I wanted to end with us asking a question that we're asking all of our guests. What is something that has been a game changer for you in your walk of faith? Whether it's a perspective you've gained, a habit you've picked up, or maybe one that you dropped. It can be anything. What's been a game changer for you in your walk of faith?
Ooh, I can't specifically say one thing, but something that happened or it has been reoccurring is, so through baseball, there is, with minor league and major league umpires, there's a Christian organization called CFC, Calling for Christ. It's a conference that we do every December, and you have to be a minor league or major league umpire to attend.
Okay.
So my first time attending there, I went not knowing what to expect. They try to tell you like, oh, we do Bible studies, we do worships, you have off time to go fishing, shoot guns, whatever. So you try to mix in the fun, and then also you're in God's Word and learning. So I went the first year. It was like, oh yeah, that was cool. Let me try it again. Well, we're here 5 years later, and just that organization and the game of baseball has changed me tremendously in my walk. Because beginning, I wasn't in a great stage. of life. I was, going through some stuff and whatnot, and just wasn't really into being in the Bible, wasn't into just, going to church and doing these things. It was just kind of like something you felt like you had to do.
Right.
So getting into CFC and continuously going there for 5 years straight and hearing the speakers that they had, and I'll tell you a speaker in a second, but that organization changed my spiritual life. And then going forward, just one specific thing. One of the speakers, his name's Jeff Orge, Jeffiorg. He was the president of a seminary in Oregon.
Okay.
But now just recently got elected to be the CEO and president of the Southern Baptist Committee.
Okay.
So very well-known guy. He's got his own podcast. He's written a couple books. So check him out. Great guy to listen to. But it was last year. He was telling a story about how he was working with a Major League Baseball player and his wife. Well, the player's wife was a big Christian. She was always in the Word, doing the right thing, and he just wanted nothing to do with it. And so he was ministering to his wife for a year or so, and the player then came to his office one day and was like, all right, how do I do this Christian thing? And, that could be a very convoluted, long answer, right? And he said, you know what? I just gave him a simple answer. I said, open the Bible, probably start at Matthew since it's the New Testament, and do everything that it says to do. Simple as that.
Yeah.
I sat there and thought about it. I was like, you know what? That makes sense, right? If you want to be the best Christian you can be, best if there is a best. But if you want to be Jesus-like, read the Bible.
Yeah.
Do what it says.
Yeah. It can be, just as simple as that. I love it.
So I tell that story to make that one point of just read the Bible and do what it says.
Right.
As best as your ability. We're all sinners. We're not going to be perfect, but just crack it open, get into it, and everything it commands you to do it.
Yeah. And, as you read the Bible, there's so many things to interpret and use in your own life and apply and all these things. So, we're saying, it's as simple as that. And it can also look very complicated or very gray area. But kind of the point is just get in there and you will have access to this peace that we are speaking of.
Yeah. And
Through it all.
y'all might have listeners out there that are maybe starting their walk and journey.
Right.
Some that are years in, however long they've been doing it, but it's good to recenter yourself and just say, you know what, let me just get in the Bible and let me try to do everything that it tells me to do.
No, that's a very good thought. I love it. Okay, well, thank you for being a guest today on our podcast.
Yes.
Hope you enjoy your beverage and your refreshments.
Oh yeah, I loved them. It was great facility here. Everything.
State of the art. That's what we are.
Yeah. And just for the people out there too, umpires, the bad guys, they can be Christians too.
Well, that's a different topic for a different day, maybe.
Yeah. I'll be glad to come back in the studio.
We can argue some umpire calls offline.
Will do.
That's a good thought to end with here. So thank you, Jared, for coming today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right.
Well, I hope everyone out there enjoyed our two guests we had today, one on the phone and our first guest in studio. Definitely want to thank Brent and Jared for sharing their stories and taking time out of their day to kind of give us their perspectives and really help all of us. And that's going to wrap up today's episode. Just going to do some final thoughts. Darcy, you got any?
Yeah, so I think an underlying theme that we heard in all of our stories today is kind of the surrender it takes to receive God's peace, and how much peace is there when we know we're in His will.
Absolutely.
And, obviously when we talk about like hearing from God, hopefully we're also responding to whatever He's saying, and then therefore in His will, and that's where that peace comes from.
Yeah, I think we didn't necessarily speak this on our two examples, but offline we had both thought this, and it seems to be a theme. Man, there is know, for as much as I personally had, searched for, hearing God's voice and stuff like that, man, when you do hear it and do not just hear it, but follow through it, even as trivial as it can seem,
Yeah.
there's just just complete, peace that comes with that. And with all the outside noise that happens today, I think that's one reason why, I kind of said in the beginning, it's over 2,000 times God directly speaks to people in the Bible. And I really think a lot of us could probably have a lot more, myself included, interactions. It's just so hard to clear the noise. And I think that's where meditation and just taking some time out of your day, we could probably really strengthen our own lives in that aspect.
Yeah, and I think the more that we are talking with him and interacting with him and building our relationship, so in prayer, in church, around other Christians, not that we don't commune with others either, but
Right.
the more that we're putting in those efforts, the more we will, I think, be able to recognize his voice.
Yes.
And we talked today obviously about all the different ways he can speak to us, so it doesn't have to be audible, it doesn't have to be anything, it could be through
others.
And my mom and I were talking, it could be through a song, so music is a big one, it could be through a dream, all these things. But I think the more that we are reaching out to him and listening for him, the more we'll be able to recognize.
Now, definitely got to sharpen your tools out there.
For sure.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode, and it actually kind of leads into what we're going to talk about next week. So thinking about sharpening those tools, we're going to talk about just going to church in general, what that can do for you as well as for others, and just all the aspects of what going to church on a Sunday can do for you.
Yeah. Do we need church? That's the question.
Yes. No, and it is a legitimate question I think a lot of us have.
Yeah, and I think you can probably guess where Brian and I stand on it, but we've talked through what we want to cover, and I do think there's some good stuff here to talk about that I think will give people a lot to think about and consider.
Absolutely. So today, I hope you got some good information about how God can speak to us, the examples of the different ways we've felt it, and maybe you guys have some different ones out there, and hopefully this will give you guys something to unpack as we have on the episode.
Yes.
So now you go out and discuss.